Welcome to this week's episode of Tell Me More. We're in the studio and we're kicking off Missions Month. So we talk about a lot. We talk about global missions. We critique global missions. We talk about Acts. We talk about Luke, the author of Acts. It's really fun, really insightful, and we're glad you're here listening. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming in hot. I'm going to tell you right now, we have not prepared for this episode, but we have plenty to talk about.
I did listen to the sermon.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Me too.
No way.
I did.
For real?
I did.
At one-time speed.
A lot of P's.
Okay, here's
one-time speed is live.
Here's the other very
I listened to it live.
Here's the very revealing question.
Have
you listened to last week's sermon yet? Either one.
No.
I didn't. No, I'm probably not gonna.
Here's the thing. If you think I'm gonna watch Jurassic Park, you got another thing coming.
I'm supposed to do something, and if I do that, then you're supposed to watch. Do you remember what it was?
Remember.
Dang it! It's a book. I think I have to read a book.
You had to buy Dan Fogelberg and listen to the Dan Fogelberg album. I gave it to you, and you gave it back.
I did listen to Dan Fogelberg.
On Spotify.
You listened to part of one song on your phone.
No, I played the album. The
entire album?
On Spotify. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah,
what was your favorite song?
I don't remember. I was going to make something up. How about A Bridge Under Troubled
The one Ray sings.
Not Simon Garfunkel.
I know.
Sorry. Longer Than.
Yes, that one you sang at your wedding.
Longer Than.
Yeah, the one you sang at your wedding.
Leader of the Band.
Leader of the Band. No, I like Longer Than better than Leader of the Band.
Right. Okay, good. Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's Missions Month at First Baptist Arlington.
It's a big deal.
I love Missions Month.
Tell us why. Tell me more.
I just love everything about it.
What was okay, this is a big question, and for those listening or watching, we hope that you did participate both in Sunday morning and last night. Sunday morning had lots of beautiful elements to it, very thoughtful, very compelling sermon. The Korean choir, which I hope we talk about. Last night, we had a very pointed, very purposeful night of worship and prayer about our personal engagement with the gospel, as well as our call just to whatever. But of all the things yesterday, tell me what you thought was, you can go to shallow level, like your favorite, or perhaps the most impactful, the most thing you're most proud of for your church, whatever you want to do there. Both of y'all, please. What'd you love about November 3rd?
So much. I loved watching our people go forward. And if you weren't there last night, we had our congregation pick up ping pong balls, white ones, that basically represent a person that you're praying for who doesn't know Jesus. And so to see people from our church go forward and spend some time praying, pick up a ping pong ball, and write the person that they're praying for's initials on that ball was really moving and powerful.
Yes, I agree. Sorry, I'll let y'all answer.
Well, it's not really shallow, but just one of my favorite things about Missions Month is having all the flags displayed across our campus. Just the reminder that we live among the nations live among us.
Oh, it's so fun to see people in our church go and find their flag from their home country.
Get their photos made.
It's sweet.
We used to do the parade of flags, and when we did, the people, whenever they had we would call the name of every country, and people in the church would stand up, when their country was called, and so it's very sweet. But I just love seeing the display of them. I love all the material that we distribute that's formational for our people. So to me this year, I think it's been very holistic. Bible study material for Sunday school classes, and the devotional guide, and resources, and QR codes, and videos, and there's just a lot of information about the mission of God available for you this month at our church, and our church takes it seriously. So I love it all. And certainly we have this church in Korea who's one of their pastors visited our church a few years ago and just enjoyed and appreciated who we are. And they had made a concerted effort to start sending some of their students here to America to broaden their horizon, their intellectual journey. But one of the mandatory things is they have to attend church while they're in America. And they have part of their team here to ensure that. But And so about 5 years ago, they found us and have been a part of our church now. And so we have new students every year. And so a number of them sang for us yesterday morning, as y'all know. It's just beautiful.
Beautiful.
You know,
Yeah.
and
For so many reasons.
yeah,
Just lovely.
just humble, and the fact that they would take the time to sing a song that's familiar to us, but put it more into their understanding of it, that really communicates their language better and what they mean by it all. But then at the last, kind of as a shout out to us, go ahead and sing it the way we would sing it in English. I thought, that just modeled so many things for me, you know, just if you were paying attention. And I think our people were, just by how they responded. It was very sweet.
Well, I was watching from the Welcome Home Center, and I saw a standing ovation in the first service, which is just quite meaningful. They don't.
And in the second, it happened.
Did they? Okay, yeah, I was doing something.
Our people were touched by it.
They should. I mean, and they.
What a gift.
Yeah, I'm glad that they're seeing what I'm seeing, and that's just really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot.
So, yeah.
Anyway.
But last night
cool.
was a very powerful, meaningful, significant time of worship, communion. You did a great job leading us in communion.
Thank you.
And just confession and conviction and commitment. And yeah, it was just all there for the taking last night. And it's been a long time. I'm trying to remember. It might be the only time, maybe, that I have ever sat in the congregation to have the Lord's Supper served to me in my own church.
How was that experience?
It was good. It was very humbling. It was very quiet, very reverent for me, very meaningful. But I can't remember a time, and I've only been doing this since 1983, so it's not like I've been doing it for a while. So 40 years.
Just a handful.
Yeah, I've never had the Lord's Supper served to me in my own church that I can remember, because I've always overseen it. I mean, the deacons will come and serve me, but I'm always leading.
Yeah, no, I heard it the right way.
I don't
How about that?
know that I've ever.
And we kind of stumbled into that, in the planning.
But it was very powerful, very meaningful.
Yeah.
I also think that modeled something for our church, that our belief in you and Katy, and the fact that you serve at the pastoral level in the life of this church, and we believe that and trust that. And then, for Ashley to be leading our global mission effort, to me it sends the right kind of message that
it does.
The full spectrum of the people of God are serving God here in this place and leading. And and also when I was sitting there thinking last night, you, Luke, and Ashley leading, and Michael Glenn leading the service last night. It's four young leaders. We had me and Aaron, who would tip the scale in the other direction.
Yeah.
But
very youthful, though.
Yeah, to
y'all
have
are very
young
youthful
leaders
boomers
in front of our church, leading and challenging us in a very considerable, meaningful, significant expression of who our church is. It was very encouraging to me. So it's good job.
It's an honor to be a part of it.
I'm proud of all of y'all. And
it's
you
fun.
two are a member of the engagement team, along with Ashley and Kurt. And so you're in the middle of it anyway. But it was just good to see it all out in public.
Yes.
So there were a lot of things that were meaningful to me yesterday. And of course, Cindy and I, there's some of it we can't hardly even do. It's just emotional for us, just the whole calling to mission, and it's just connected very deeply into our souls. And so, it's always a meaningful time. So,
I loved watching a couple of our church people last night lift up their kids to throw a little ping pong ball in that display. I think that's very symbolic, very meaningful. It's not just modeling. It's you're physically lifting up your kid or grandkid. Saw both.
Yeah.
To participate in this act.
Well, I think
pretty cool.
It's a really great way to broach a conversation with your children about, do you have friends who don't know who Jesus is? Can you pray for those people?
Yeah. And
Let's talk about that. It's tactile, it's
yeah.
tangible. And then if you don't have kids, we've done such a good job. Our communications and design team have hung just really great decorations in the children's building, especially on the second floor where kids can read. But yesterday, my oldest, going to Sunday school, commented on the things hanging from the ceiling, which are just
even the staircase going up. It's
the staircase
just hard to
going up.
miss.
Go to the preschool children's building if you don't normally, because there's some really great things to help children. But just hanging from the ceiling are things like, I can help someone today. I can tell a friend about Jesus. Very simple, child-appropriate statements, but my daughter
Could we hang some of those in the adult area?
We
probably could.
I was just thinking, go ahead.
Break it down for us.
Sorry.
Kyle's filming for us today, and
Step
he's
one.
chuckling over there.
But your daughter noticed.
Yeah.
Don't you love that?
I do. I love it. I love the way Missions Month opens up just a church-wide conversation. And so...
And our children, yours are very young, Katy,
They are.
but they're coming.
Yeah.
And Kyle is
and they're
in here,
watching.
so his children are old enough. His daughter is.
Yeah.
And yours,
About to be
Luke,
5.
They're
Pushing 5, right? Yeah.
They're listening to what we talk about. Mm-hmm. If you don't think they are, then you're not. They're paying attention. You may not be, but I can promise you they are. And for them to hear conversations about Jesus, and even hearing you talk about that with friends or in some other setting, it leaves an impression on children. My father was a very outgoing, gregarious person, and he was a man of faith, and it did not bother my father to talk about his faith in almost any setting. So I can remember that as a child, but we always would just say, well, that's Daddy. If you bring this up, this particular thing up, my daddy's going to talk to you about Jesus.
I remember, if I might tell a short story, I may have said this in here before, but Ryan and I don't think we were married yet. I think we were still dating. We went and visited the Stearns, Beth and Nathan, in their Colorado cabin, and they took us to the top. I was like, what's the easiest way to get to the top of a 14er? Because I'm not going to hike a 14er.
In a car? Is that what they said in a
Well, they were
Jeep?
like, well, we've got some 4-wheelers, and we can, Nathan, of course, could lead this. I mean, he could open a shop in Colorado. It was like, let me take you to the top of a mountain. .com, whatever. But so Nathan, it really enjoyed kind of being a tour guide, but took us as far up as we could go in the car with the trailer. Then we got on these ATVs and went as far up as we could go in the ATVs. And then we just had to hike the last 700 feet, 500 feet.
Easy peasy.
Well, howdy.
Or maybe it wasn't even that much. I might be messing it up. Whatever it was, there's no oxygen up there, so I could barely make it at all. I mean, I was taking 3 steps and stopping, and Nathan had to walk beside me. It was embarrassing. Anyway, we get to the top, and it's us, the 4 of us, and a person, a woman. And wouldn't you know, Beth Stearns, unapologetically, and I mean it, presented this person with the gospel. And I was like, Beth, we're alone on a mountain. If this goes bad, we're stuck with this person, and I think that she had already asked for a ride down, because we did have ATVs, and the lady but it was super well accepted by this person. She was actually truly a believer and was working in a ministry of some setting. And then it was a great, fruitful conversation, but the conversation opened up, and Beth took the opportunity with no
I love it.
regret or shame, and it was very natural. And I say this, and it might embarrass Beth, and I don't mean to, but I was really modeling something for me, truly, of she's just living her life, and this is where she is. I just happened to be we have trapped this woman on top of a mountain. She's already agreed to ride down with us, and now you're but it wasn't at all. It was very natural, and it for me, and that was years ago. It's probably 7 or 8 years ago, but it was Beth being Beth, and it's that she's just going to do that, and that's I love that that's one of our deacons, modeling this for her kids and grandkids, and I don't know, it's just good.
Because I heard yesterday that God's people are equipped for His mission.
Let's talk about it.
That's what I heard yesterday.
Let's talk about it.
That's a great example.
Did you hear it, or did you say it?
Well, I've heard it before, and then I decided to talk about it.
So I see you got your Bible open. For those that are watching, this little display
it's the book of
be,
Acts.
But you got it open to Acts, and I'm seeing some highlighting and some handwriting.
Well, I've just now started marking in this Bible. I've held on to this Bible for a while.
It's a nice Bible.
To not mark in it, but I've gotten to where I can't help myself anymore, and so I've just started baptizing it. It is what it is.
Okay. Well,
and so
if I had to guess, is that Acts 1:8?
It is
highlighted.
Yeah.
Okay.
What a verse.
Yeah. And but also I love Luke. I love Luke.
What's not to love?
I love Luke.
What about Katy? No, I'm just kidding.
And,
maybe my mustache is not to love. Kyle.
If you're listening, Luke has a stellar mustache today.
Yeah. I asked him Sunday, I said, did you like make a mistake when you were trimming? Because I heard guys that do that have to shave their whole beard off. I've never been able to grow one, so I would not know. But he said, no.
Just an impulse.
He just did it. You know?
Shelby,
I debated because,
Why? Just the attention of it all?
Oh, you can't change your appearance if you work at this church.
I know.
And not have
I don't
18 conversations.
That's not I love that people love us enough to notice things.
I love you all.
That's why I keep coloring my hair, like everybody thinks. So I don't want it to change. I don't want y'all to notice.
You've heard it here. He doesn't color his hair.
He does not. I think have more gray hair than you do.
I think that's true. I think I believe you at this point.
One day when I start coloring it, I may color it just straight out gray. You
can't. It's hard. And some of our women who I journey with have made the transition from dyeing it, I dye my hair and my hair is colored. But at some point you're like, you know what, I've got enough gray underneath there. I need to transition it. But it's a hard transition to make. Yeah. It's a hard transition to make.
Well, I've already decided when mine turns gray, it's just going to be a ponytail. I'm growing it out. Yeah, I'm growing it out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Here's some inspiration there. Yeah. I'm praying for the gray. Sorry.
Luke, I love that.
The book of Luke.
Yes,
and the author of Luke.
Yes, because
Luke Acts.
When you think about it, you have these men that felt led by the Lord, inspired by the Spirit to write the Gospels. And we are forever indebted.
Truly.
We are.
To these
changed
men.
Our lives.
And to think about how hard it is
changed your
to
life
write.
In the ways you don't even know.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, think about how hard it is for us to write anything meaningful with everything we have available to us.
Yeah.
For these men to do this. So I'm thinking about Luke.
Yeah,
Luke goes with Paul to Caesarea. Paul's in jail for a couple of years in Caesarea. And I'm just assuming Luke's with him then. This is my take. I think Luke spends those 2 years exploring, interviewing. I think that's how he was able to pull so much of this together. That would be my take. Because some of what Luke writes about to me sounds very personal. Like he'll say things like, and Mary treasured all these things up in her heart. Well, that sounds like him thinking, so what happened, Mary? And Mary just says, it got to where I didn't even know what to do with it all, so I just kind of held on to it in my heart. It feels like an interview to me. So I love that about Luke. But for whatever reason, and you think about Matthew, Matthew's gospel is massive. It is just jam-packed with so much Hebrew imagery. And it's like the Old Testament just played out right in front of you, being fulfilled now, the Old Covenant being fulfilled by the New Covenant. And Matthew just presents this incredible
you should read Matthew and Isaiah almost hand in hand.
Yes, it's unbelievable. So we're going to kind of do that in December. We're going to do Isaiah, and then in January we're going to do Matthew.
Teaser.
There's a method every once in a while. There really is, y'all. I promise.
A method to the madness.
But for whatever reason, Matthew ends. John doesn't. John writes the Revelation. John writes letters, all kind of stuff. But Luke decides to write the history of the early church. And, y'all, we are just incredibly indebted to Luke for that. Because think about how it has placed so much of what we know about Paul in context. It just all makes so much more sense theologically and historically. And I'm just so grateful for the book of Acts. I just think that we would be so incredibly diminished without the book of Acts. Yeah. In our understanding of mission and the role of the early church and how they grappled with things theologically.
Because if you just had the Gospels.
Which are incredible.
Oh, no doubt.
Awesome.
It's probably my favorite part of the Bible. Just call it what it is. And I love John, so all the kind of Johannine literature is terrific.
Yeah.
But then you'd have some epistle. You'd have letters, Paul's letters.
Yeah. But you'd have zero context for understanding.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the narrative of all of it
together.
You're right. It's a very important book.
It really
we know that, but it's good to say it out loud.
Everything to me in context.
Yeah, you'd be missing a big chunk of. You'd have to piece things together.
Verses that seem like throwaway lines in Acts, like Paul stopped in Centrea and got a haircut.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which is in the book of Acts.
Exactly.
But it's likely that in that port, that's where he meets this woman named Phoebe. Yeah. And then one day he sits down, he writes a letter to this divided church in Rome, and he says, who do I know that's going to Rome? Oh, Phoebe. Yeah. Here, Phoebe, take this letter. I need you to read it aloud and then answer any questions that anyone has about it. And then Phoebe sails from her port city, where Paul got a haircut, delivers Romans.
Maybe one of the most important letters in history.
And how do we know all that? The book of Acts.
Yeah.
It's good.
Even like Timothy, he decides to go ahead and have Timothy circumcised because he's trying to figure out how to make sure that the gospel's not hindered by people who have all these prejudices. He's doing his best to model things in front of us, and it's like, oh, okay, I get all so much information in Acts. Doctrinal question: how do you manage these doctrinal issues? Well, bring the leaders of the church together and sit down and ask the Spirit of God to guide you, and then communicate them. And what about the lost Gentile world? Well, that was a major question for them. Well, Luke tells the story very honestly, and it's fits and starts. I mean, and I love that he does that he lets you know, Simon Peter has this dream, and he just says, well, I'm not going to eat anything unclean, and then all of a sudden he's standing at Cornelius' gate, and he realizes, oh, okay, obviously this is God helping me understand.
But then he still struggles with it a few chapters later.
Yeah, which is awesome, Yeah. And so that's why, to me, the book of Acts, it's I love church history. Y'all know that, and there's some incredible church historians. Augustine, to me, helps us understand the progress of history, and then just us trying to grapple with how all this unfolded. And Luke's the first one to really do that for us in the New Testament era. So that's why I love it. So in our readings this month, I put the narrative readings in there. If you'd like to, you can just read the whole book during the month, which I think would be awesome to do. Or just focus on the focal passages. It's either one's fine.
We just want you reading the scripture.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. But so the opening page, I love how he sets the stage. I mean, he's writing about the period before the ascension, and just gives to me some crucial information, that Jesus chose people. That was still going to be his plan, and Jesus was alive bodily. They talked to him, they listened to him, he taught them.
Let's talk about that. Just showed up.
Which to me is incredible.
And we have no record of any of those teachings. Really.
Yeah.
Which is even
unbelievable. And he talks about the Spirit of God and how the Spirit of God is going to be a part of all this, and then promises the Spirit and the power that we get, and the commission to take it to the whole world, and just trying to think through. I've been rereading a little bit, just kind of from their perspective, so to speak. And it just kind of, to me, it was a little overwhelming this past week. I was thinking about that small group of people and Jesus telling them, well, you're going to take this to the ends of the earth. I don't know what they thought the ends of the earth were, but I know for sure that many of them had never thought about going to the ends of the earth, wouldn't have the means to go to the ends of the earth. I don't believe Simon Peter grew up as a little boy thinking one day I'm probably going to go and die in Rome. I doubt that he knew anybody who'd ever been to Rome. Maybe, I'm not sure. There were enough Gentiles in northern Galilee, maybe. But you know what I mean? It wasn't like the way we are. Hey, you think one day you might ever go to Washington, D.C.? Well, of course. I'm sure I will. I mean, I will probably figure that out in my lifetime, Look at a fisherman in Galilee. You ever thought about heading over to Rome? No. Probably not. Well, so what about putting your life at stake and giving everything you have and taking that all the way to Rome? Well, I don't know that that's even in the realm of possibility of them, and yet Jesus tells them this is what you're going to do, and then he leaves. So, I mean, I didn't really talk about that Sunday. I didn't get to the ascension, but think about that. He left them.
You can tell us about it here, though.
It would have felt
and
possible,
he said it's better
maybe.
For me to leave
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Had he been there, maybe I could have been thinking, okay, well, you've just been raised from the dead. Okay, maybe you're going to take us to Rome, and all of a sudden he's gone. And then you are.
That whole scene is just wild.
It's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, powerful is a good word. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is wild and powerful.
Yeah.
It is both of those things.
Right. And so think about it. The gospel gets all the way here. We're the uttermost at that point, at the ends of the earth, and we're Gentiles. So we're not in the script right now.
No.
Because even this group of people right here who's being commissioned by Jesus, they're all Jews.
Pentecostals, all Jewish.
Yeah. So what were they burdened about the Gentiles of the world? All due respect, I don't think so. This was their Messiah. And the reason I believe that is because in verse 6, and I didn't get to all this Sunday morning, John Stott loves to talk about verse 6, and he just says you can tell by their adverbs, their verbs, their nouns, they just don't get it. He says, are you now going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And Dr. Stott says, you think the kingdom is only for Israel, and you're going to do it now. What do you think he's been doing?
Yeah, they don't get it.
He's been establishing the kingdom of God already. You're actually in it. And but think about it. Are they worried about Gentiles?
Right?
Well, no. Why would they be worried about Gentiles? They weren't worried about us. This was their Messiah, and so the Messiah has come to fulfill all the promises to Israel. What's going to have to happen is God's going to have to open their minds to read the book of Isaiah differently, and this call to the nations and the light to the Gentiles. And these lights are going to start coming on for them with the leadership of the Spirit. And the next thing you know, this thing is going to be a worldwide movement. And consequently, everybody sitting in this room right now, we're all Gentiles. So we're outsiders in this story, but we've been brought in. Well, we now have this in our hands, and now it's like a reverse. We've got to go back now to some of these places and re-evangelize, if you will, and take the gospel to the uttermost. That's still the calling we all have. And so I think it's a responsibility that we all share. And I know some people look at it and think, well, I just can't. I have no idea what to do with, lost people who are living in some obscure place that's so far from us, and they're out of reach for us. They're in India, or they're in China, or they're in Turkey, or they're in Iran, or in Syria. I'm just trying to get through this week in my family. I get that. But what I would say is that's just not an excuse for us, though. We have to have that burden and somehow find our way into this story. And so I think a great place to start is where you are. But before this month is over, we're going to hear that call, though, to make sure that we do our part all over the world. So I can promise you, when Elijah Brown gets here on the last Sunday in November, he's going to turn our hearts toward what do we do.
Preview.
Yeah.
November 24.
November 24.
Can I give a little preview for November 24 as a whole? And then I have another question to guide this. Okay. November 24, in the morning, Elijah Brown, another kind of rare thing for you, Dr. Wiles, to be here while someone else preaches.
Right.
And that says something about Elijah Brown, to be honest.
Yeah, he's
I don't know his title. He's
General Secretary.
Okay, of the Baptist World Alliance, which is our most, globally, our strongest Baptist
it is. It's our connection.
Yeah. And doing really, really thoughtful and good work around the world. Good thing to be a part of.
Yes. We love the Baptist World Alliance.
Yes, we're pro BWA for sure. That evening, which it will have a more light and familial but very important thing called Deck the Halls at 4 p.m., where we're going to decorate our church for Christmas.
Hanging of the Green.
Yeah, it's an FBCA hanging of the green.
Yeah, our version.
Yeah, a little more laid back, but Erica and Jen have put a lot of good thought into it, and it's going to be really fun and sweet. It's for everybody. So if you have little kids you want to bring, we've kind of mapped out areas where that might be better to decorate there, and we have, if you're not real mobility impaired, we've got some thought into all of that. So show up. Have fun, be here.
Who's going to hang the angels from the ceiling in the sanctuary?
We did. Well, I don't know if there are angels from the ceiling in the sanctuary.
I was wondering.
But we did talk about.
In the past, I always wondered who did it.
Only staff on ladders was one of our things that we considered for liability purposes.
Okay.
So, welcome to American church. So anyway, November 24. But Elijah Brown coming, and to in some ways to do what you just said, kind of hold our feet to the fire of the global. Burden is the word you use to be part of the mission of God, the Christian witness globally. But can I ask a question to both of y'all as missiologists on this side of the table? We're all missiologists, but you know what I mean. Y'all have studied it at a more.
The separation of church and mission is a Christendom era invention.
Yes, and I don't want to say that I'm not a missiologist. That's not fair to. That's not helpful for our congregation. We're all thinking missiologically, even if we don't know it. But when you talked about, Dr. Wiles, kind of the burden is not really the word I want to use, but we'll use it for now, to go take the gospel to the world. In this modern era, there's been some critique of it, even within the church, that it might be just ethically either tied to colonialism or like just the ethics of stripping someone of their culture and reintroducing ours. Like, can y'all speak to that? I'm guessing there are right ways to do it and there are wrong ways to do it. Yeah. And we're learning maybe best practices or whatever. So I'll lob that one to y'all. So
I can take a stab.
I trust you.
Missions history. So I'll just say, church history and missions history have different emphases.
They do.
Missions history is a story largely of what we got wrong, which is painful.
Tell me more.
And that God used us in spite of our incredible.
But there are some things for which we've had to repent.
Dad, God can hit straight with a crooked stick, and indeed He did. There's a lot of things we repented of. I think we're doing better than we've ever done before. But
Yes.
if you are trying to figure this out, missions history is complicated because it's not just Protestants. Protestants actually didn't do mission for 200 or 300 years after the Protestant Reformation.
It's one of the sad chapters in church
Yeah,
history.
Protestant reformers don't talk about mission at all.
It's a little too insular.
But it took a Baptist.
Because it was a Catholic thing.
But a Baptist preacher stepped in.
Yeah.
But go ahead, sorry. Just
No, you're not wrong.
Just put a little plug
Yeah.
in, a little William
Baptist.
Carey.
When the Baptists get it right, we
Little
should celebrate
William Carey,
it because we
William
also
Carey.
have some repenting to
1792.
do.
It took us a while.
So, for a long time, it's a Catholic invention. And so you think about Catholic colonialism, you think about South America. Christianity came with the swords of the conquistadors and all of the problems that accompanied it. And so you have some people, by and large, the only people you could speak well of in South American missions history would be Bartolomé de las Casas, who gets called the slave to the slaves, because he essentially is one of the few people who doesn't use the power of conquistadors and their swords. In South America, as Catholicism comes, that's a whole sad chapter. As it spreads around the world and finally gets linked up with Protestantism, it largely comes in Protestant economic trade development in the colonial era. That's why this charge of colonialism comes so large. And so it wasn't just that they were trying to take the gospel. By and large, European Christians thought that they also, to Christianize people was to basically Europeanize people.
Which is one of the huge mistakes.
Huge mistakes.
Yeah.
And so you have them
And
going into cultures and changing names. So if you've ever wondered why people in the Philippines have Spanish last names, it's
thank
because
Christianity.
basically Spanish missionaries and colonizers came in and basically said, here's a book of last names you can pick from now. Pick one.
Yeah.
And so this is complicated history. So again, there's a lot we got wrong. We're doing more right than ever. And one of the things that I think we're doing better than ever is, and it came, one of the conversations we had in what do we name this series? Because you came to us this summer and said, Together to the Nations. And engagement team talked about it with you. And one of the reasons we switched it to Together to the People.
Which really is what ethne means. Is
Behind
so
the
in the
scenes.
Greek,
Behind
in the Great
the scenes
Commission,
people.
it's make disciples of all ethne, peoples. And so in 1974, you have this radical shift in missions thinking comes with a guy named Ralph Winter. And prior to that, missionaries and mission agencies had thought in terms of reaching nation states, so geopolitical boundaries. But you think about India as a country has how many thousands of languages and people groups. So Ralph Winter comes in and says, actually, nation states is not the most strategic way to do this. We need to think people groups.
So if I came and said, I want to reach India with the gospel, Ralph would say,
No.
think differently.
Yeah. Don't think about India as a country and
As
Indians
a
as
solid
countrymen.
group of people, because there's
Think
so
about-
many
right.
different.
a bit
yeah.
like sending a missionary to the United States before it was the United States. And you get here.
Yeah.
And there's all these Native American groups. So what does it mean to be a missionary here?
Yeah.
It depends on
they
the
don't speak the same
group,
language.
right?
They don't know anything about each other.
Yeah.
So the whole
do you
world
go for
is
the air
really that way.
quad, you go for it.
That's
yeah.
right.
And that's basically what Ralph Winter argues
And
is
some of these nation states now are doing too, that we should probably repent of.
Yeah.
Right.
So
But
that's
that
one of the
changed
reasons
everything.
It changed. It reformats the entire way that we've talked about mission from the mid 20th century onward. And so you find a lot more emphasis on people group. That's where this emphasis on unreached people groups also comes in, as Ralph Winter in his work. So you find a lot more culturally savvy, linguistically savvy work, preserving culture, maintaining culture. An emphasis on indigenous leadership starts to come as a result of that. So a lot of the things that guide our philosophy now really just come back from the 1970s.
And it was hard for those of us in our world back in those days when this was happening. I was a kid still in the church, but I was in a Southern Baptist church. Well, Southern Baptists, who were viewed as kind of the premier example of how to do cooperative missions.
And was it the IMB then, or was it
Yes.
called something else?
It was the Foreign Mission
Okay,
Board,
because I know they've changed names throughout the
which
history.
again is an interesting word, foreign,
Right.
as
Yeah.
opposed
But that's
to.
our 2024 lens.
It is.
I mean,
so it's
I get,
okay.
yeah. But we're learning.
But at the time, we were all nations We only went to nations where we were invited, and there was kind of a mission center for every nation, and so all of our missionaries were organized that way. And when Ralph Winter makes this presentation, and you've got guys like John Stott and others who were really more embraced broadly than somebody like Ralph Winter. Cindy and I spent one summer at the U.S. Center for World Mission and studied with Ralph Winter. Ralph Winter's a very nerdy, intellectual.
Where is the U.S. Center for World Mission?
It's in Pasadena.
Richmond?
It's now Frontier
two different
Ventures.
things.
Yeah,
Got it.
Changed the name of Pasadena, California. But anyway,
That's where I met Cindy, actually.
That's right.
Whoa, full
so
circle.
When guys like
Okay.
Stott and others who were much more widely known in evangelical circles said, this guy's right. Well, people like Keith Parks, who at the time was leading the International Mission Board, and others were like, whoa, we need to figure this out. And so Luke's mentor, Mike Stroop, was with the IMB in those days, and he was given a special assignment to begin the first emphasis for Southern Baptists to actually take that philosophy and theology and missiology and put it into practice. And so you had this shadow organization built that Stroop led, and that was missionaries who were going to work with people groups, not to work with nations. And it created some controversy on the field because you had classically trained missionaries who weren't sure what to do with these missionaries who weren't a part of the mission
Yeah,
station.
you got sent a competing ideologies.
You weren't, and they didn't work for them. They worked for Stroop. So it created some challenges, but it ended up everybody pretty much realized this is the right way to do it. It was a both and for a while. But Luke is right. Over time, it carried the day. And so it has had a profound impact upon us, on all of us. So for example, our church has adopted the Fulani of West Africa. We didn't adopt West Africa or even one country. We're trying to figure out how can we share the love of Jesus in some ways that touch one of the largest unreached people groups on the continent of West Africa, the Fulani. Well, they live everywhere, so we've had to get a little more specific about it. But there was a time when we wouldn't even thought to do that because it just wouldn't have made sense to anybody, and none of our missiologists would have even instructed us to do it.
Yeah, they've said you set up a station in this country.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
And that's what you do. And so, but I also appreciate the humility of it now. And so I would go back to your original question, Katie.
Yeah.
What Luke did a great job of sharing the history. When you think about missions being connected to what the East India Bay Company, which is a trade commerce company, and somehow or another it's also got people bringing you the gospel.
Yeah, which was an intentional trade strategy, not an intentional Christian strategy.
Exactly.
And it's, again, I don't mean to take but it's married to power, which is always problematic.
It is.
We have to be very careful.
So you had mission as a power over instead of mission as coming alongside people.
Or mission as a veiled excuse to go profit somewhere.
Correct.
Which is, let's be careful, y'all.
So you think about
Still,
now.
Today, let's be careful.
We've learned, hopefully. And so, to answer your question, we're not going anywhere to transport culture. So that's not what we're doing. So we're bringing the gospel into your culture, and then it'll have to be somehow adapted in certain ways in order for it to work in your culture. But we're not bringing American culture. Our workers, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, we're doing our very best.
Yes.
To be thoughtful.
No. And there are places where we are more support in the background than we are on the leading edge. Our work in West Africa, our workers there are support workers. They're not leading edge workers, and they only do things they're invited to do. For example, it took a long time for them to even want one of our workers to even be engaged in a baptismal service. And now it's done very humbly, but it's done alongside an indigenous leader who's very widely recognized, who invites all kind of people to assist him to do that, not just our worker. Whereas in times past, in the model Luke was describing, no indigenous worker would have been doing anything.
No.
The missionary would have done it all.
By the missionary,
and
on behalf of the people.
We've learned so many things, and I'm so grateful we have. And I think we do it in a very humble, thoughtful way. And we're partnered with people now as a church that are very missiologically savvy. And that's why you can trust that what we're investing ourselves in, we're doing it with the right people in the right way.
We're very thoughtful about how we engage in partnership with people. And that's the key word, is partnership.
That's even true here. I think that here, It's a little challenging here, and I get it, because we are so culturally insensitive that without even meaning to be, and I'm giving us the benefit of the doubt. They're just things that we do as a part of our American culture. That it's just how we do it. And so when someone from another culture, as we have so many now, who live in our community, right, Luke? We're the most diverse city in America.
Can you believe that?
Well, think about all the converging cultures, because some people say, well, it's interesting to me that you'll have a church that is like a Filipino church, or a church that is just adapted to one certain people group. Well, that's not that shocking. Because in order to become a part of our church, you've got to accommodate a lot.
Yeah.
Culturally, if it's not your culture.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that critically of us. I'm just being honest. It's just an objective thing. It is the truth. And we can learn, and we're continuing to learn, and we're going to learn to be more culturally competent and sensitive. Yeah, but even with that said,
there's a book on our display, by the way, called Becoming All Things, and it's about how you navigate cross-cultural relationships for the sake of the gospel.
Right.
Great book.
And so, we have to even think about it here, because we're not here at this church to somehow captivate people and convince them that the American way of life is completely biblical. That's just so not what we're doing. I mean, we have to maintain a certain distance so that we can be prophetic, speaking to our own culture. My culture is overwhelmed by materialism and consumerism and individualism and a lot of other isms.
And if you think that doesn't carry over into the church, just talk to cross-cultural friends.
Yes, it just does. And so we have to remain critical of that as leaders, to speak into it without being angry. It's not anger. I'm studying 1 Timothy right now, just personally. I'm, as a pastor, just listening to Paul, trying to teach Timothy. Okay, you're pastor in this church in Ephesus. Here's some things to be thoughtful about. And one of the things he says in 1 Timothy is all this is rooted in love. The power, the faith, what all's happening in you, to you, through you. It's actually love. It's the love of God coming alive inside of a person. Well, that's a great motivation. It's supposed to be at the root, because we love people and we care about them. That's why we're doing any of this. So I think it's one of the things I like about Missions Month is it does remind me to challenge myself to think critically about the way I even do church here from a missiological perspective, and to be humble in it.
Good.
Because, like for example, like Luke said, you go to Sierra Leone, you'll be in one part of Sierra Leone, everybody's named Conte, or Cargbo, all these names. All of a sudden you get to the southern part of Sierra Leone, they're all named Washington and Lincoln and Johnson and Jones. And you're like, I'm sorry, I thought you said your name was George Washington. Yes, that's my name. And you're like,
where'd you get that from?
I've been over here working with, Emmanuel Cargbo, and I just met George Washington.
Yeah.
Well, the influx of British slaves and the British way of life coming through the port, well, you just got that scattered, like you said. Okay, here are y'all's names,
Yeah.
And so, so some of that is kind of in there, and you recognize it when you see it. But the good news of the way we're doing it now, in my opinion, at least in places like that, they're all the indigenous leaders are the leaders of everything.
Yeah.
And we asked them. Several years ago, we were working in Costa Rica, and there was and we're still working there. We still go. And I noticed after I'd been there 2 or 3 times, some of our leaders here were talking. I said, well, why don't we ever have a conversation with the Baptists in Costa Rica about this work in this part of the country? And one of the missionaries there said, well, because they don't work here. They just don't. And so we're the ones working here. I said, okay, that's interesting. I said, well, I still think we ought to talk to them. So Kurt Grice and Cindy and Kim, several of us, we set up a meeting with some of the Baptist leaders there, and we sat down in a room with them. And one of them spoke English, but everybody else, he was our translator. And so finally I asked the question. I said, look, we've been coming here for a while. Here's what we've been doing. We think we're doing good, but to be honest with you, we don't live here. We don't know about this culture on these reservations. We're not sure about all this, and we're trying to figure out what we should be doing. And so could we just ask y'all to think about this for us? What would y'all like us to do? What do you wish we wouldn't do? And would y'all be willing to just think through? You don't have to answer it today, but would you just be willing to think about it, and maybe at some point we can figure out a path? So they don't explain to us that the country had been divided in terms of missions, which was actually a thoughtful thing. And they said, you're right, we don't work in that part simply because we've got a different denomination that's doing it. It was all fine. But anyway, when I asked that question, so the person that was doing the translating translated it. And we all kind of sat there, and there were like 5 of them, but like the president of the convention was sitting there, Anyway, so they all kind of look at each other, and all of a sudden, a couple of them just start crying. And then they just start talking among themselves in Spanish. And I look at Kurt and I think, oh man, we have messed up. I'm not even sure what we've messed up, but we have messed up. And I looked at the translator. I said, I'm sorry. I am sorry. And he looked at me and said, it's okay. Just okay. Just hold on. They kind of kept going. Finally, they gathered themselves, and the president said, I've been a Baptist pastor in Costa Rica for like 20 years, grew up here in the church. He said, this is the first time we've ever had an American Christian ask us a question.
Yeah.
Of any type. And he said, I'm sorry. We were overwhelmed with emotion, and we don't even know how to answer because we've never been asked. We've always been told. Yeah. And I just said, I am so sorry that we've come here, And they ended up giving us some really good insight and things that we might want to think about. But I'll just never forget that. That's the first time an American Christian has ever asked us a question. Mm-hmm. So I think, I'm not dogging the people that work there. It's just that particular. But
that's a good. That captures a sentiment, doesn't it?
I think it's recognizing that even among global Christians, the reputation of American Christians is challenging.
It is.
We spent a week in Canada, as you know, for the duration of the week. Canadian Baptist Ministries had recently brought on a field personnel for Ontario from Lebanon, and he spent the entire week with us because he had just moved to Canada, and so was getting to know. He's a rep for Quebec and Ontario, so he spent the entire week with us. And at the end of the week, we're at dinner with this wonderful man, and he just says, I have a confession, everybody. And we all kind of stop and go, what is going on? And we love him so much at this point. We've gotten to know him and his family. And he looks at me and Ashley and Michael, and there's another guy with us in Toronto at that point. And he says, when I heard that the Americans were coming and that they wanted me to spend the week with them, I thought, oh, great. Here come the saviors. And so globally, it's recognizing that this reputation we have is we can come in and think we're in charge. And we can come in and just say, this is how you're going to do it. This is what we're going to do, without ever asking a question, without ever recognizing that Lebanese Christians have the intelligence to solve a lot of their problems and to reach their people.
It's pretty humbling, isn't it?
It is. It's very humbling. So it's a long podcast.
We've got a great journey ahead of us, though. We got a whole month.
We do.
Fun. My goal is to get Ashley in here and me out of here next week.
And this podcast is brought to you by and sponsored by First Baptist Arlington.
Thanks, First Baptist Arlington.
It's brought to you, it's not brought to you by the WMO, the World Mission Offering, but we would like you to consider giving to the World Mission Offering this month. It supports the intentional, careful, and thoughtful work we do both locally and globally. And it is pivotal in reaching people, and we do a lot of great things because of your gifts to the World Mission Offering. So please, please, please give to the WMO this month.
Love it.
And every month.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening to the Tell Me More podcast today. You can subscribe to this podcast on your app of choice, or you can visit us at fbca.org to find out more information about the podcast and our church. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.